No, you don't have the mic for a reason. Yeah. No, nobody's kicking you, but we can kick you off if it gets there. Whoa, what the hell, computer? Okay.
So excited.
No, we're gonna get here. This is gonna happen. What the fuck? Oh, all right. Here's your clicker. Whoa. You guys don't see this, but the laptop is fucked.
I'm worried about him.
Give us a half second and this presentation will begin. And if my esteemed male colleague poorly represents women's reproductive section discussions, we'll kick him off.
My hero.
Fuck, this is weird.
Man. We're gonna send you in there to distract him and run away.
Do you need to see this, or is looking at that okay for you?
You know this is why you're here. Yes, plan.
Well,
Thank you.
Oh, fuck, you're right.
He's already teaching us things we don't know.
I'm worried about you.
okay, guys. So, my name's Corey. I'll be talking to you guys about the anatomy and physiology of the female reproductive system for men. Yeah, it's a taboo topic that we don't always get to talk about. So, I'm looking forward to a healthy discussion. Now, I can already hear it in the room. Some of you guys might be wondering why exactly I'm qualified to mansplain the female reproductive system. So we're gonna get started. So just to kind of put things, just to put things in perspective, I'm gonna start talking about the male reproductive system just a little bit, just to make a kind of a comparison by analogy, so we kind of understand what we're getting into, guys. So an engineer's view of the male reproductive system is a light switch. At like, yeah, well, so at 13 years old or about, somewhere around there, maybe a little less, someone came around and flicked the switch on and walked away, and the switch just stays there for the most part. Like, that's where it stays forever. Here's the female side. So considerably more complex. There's a lot of levers and dials and things to keep in measure. At times it's piloted, at times it's flown autopilot, and that's kind of what we're going to get into today. As we go forward. So let's get right into it. This is the behind the scenes look that we don't always get. A couple important players here that I'll just point out. I'm a big uterus guy. So that's where I'm going to focus most of this talk. I really think the uterus is the powerhouse of the female reproductive system. You'll notice it has two layers. It has a myometrium and an endometrium. Just keep that in mind as we go forward. That's going to become very important, especially the endometrium. From there, let's keep rolling. So this slide has a lot. Don't even try to read it. There's a lot more on here than you need to know. Just for, well, maybe, right? So, oh, I lost it. Is that me?
I don't think that's you.
So, the slide wasn't really important. So the basic idea is that there's two, what they call a two gonadotropin. It was me. I'll try to stand more still, be less nervous. So, anyways, there's basically two sex steroids in both the men and the women. Not the same sex steroids, but a two sex steroids model in both sexes. What? Yeah, no, this is interactive. I'll take questions as we go. Did someone have something? I kind of heard something from...
Trans people exist.
Trans people exist. Yeah, so I should mention, that's a good point. Thank you. I'm talking about biological sexes, which can be very fraught, and that's a whole nother topic for another day. We should definitely get into that. Maybe next time they do this, that's a whole another beast. But I want to be clear, I'm not talking about genders, but sexes, which are kind of different. Anyways, so you have your 2 cells and your 2 sex hormones, and now I kind of want the projector back. I'm ready to advance the slide. Well, so any other questions so far? I'll just open it up.
What motivates you?
What I heard something from somewhere
What motivates you?
about.
Anything.
About what part? Well, I think I'm going to try to show you guys what motivates me. It's a really complicated system. It's really beautiful and profound, and good question. Yeah.
Couple more seconds. Sorry.
Couple more. It's warming up, guys.
This thing takes a while to warm up. I apologize. I saw everyone who presented before you almost step on that cord the same way you did.
Yeah.
Can you explain how to use a tampon?
I can kind of. I can't. It's kind of beyond my scope, actually. I've had it explained to me a couple times, but I can't say I got too much out of that.
It is happening. I apologize that this happened on your watch.
No, I mean, what else we got? Keep them coming. In the back.
Can you talk about the orgasm gap and why only about 65% of heterosexual women orgasm when sleeping with men?
You know, so it's a really interesting question. And I'm by no means an expert, and we really lag behind in sexual health when it comes to that. You know, it's just not something that's very studied, very understood. I would love to know. I have no clue.
Effort.
Okay, is there a clitoris section in this?
There's a man. So I was thinking about it, right? I was thinking about just including the external genitalia, just like big and large on the screen, because it's a valid point. We kind of call everything the vagina when that's not what all that is. There's like a lot of different things there that all have their own name. So we're gonna look a little further behind the curtain today. We're gonna not keep it superficial.
No, he doesn't.
Blue screen now. Hey, that's good. And we'll have time for questions at the end too, if anyone. I'm just gonna keep going. I've been up here kind of a long time. Oh, I can't. It's not gonna let me. Oh yeah, it will. Okay, so here's a picture of an ovary. And this is a composite picture. So this is a picture of the ovary at multiple points in time, with all the different stages of the egg through development. So if we look here at the ovary, it's like they took a section through it and kind of enlarged the image to see. And the important thing here is that the eggs develop over time, and women are actually born with all the eggs they're ever gonna have in their lifetime, all the viable eggs, which is considerably different than the male system. Women are born with roughly 1 million eggs, and some of those get selected by a mechanism that's not totally known to science over the course of their lifetime, whereas males have 85 million sperm produced every day. So maybe that's part of the reason why women can't keep up. To answer the person in the back, it might have something to do with that. But this is really the meat of the presentation. So you can see the developing egg at the top and the 2 hormones that cycle in the most simple form of the menstrual cycle throughout the female menstrual cycle. So we start on day 0, and guys, day 0 is the first day of the first day of bleeding. That's what's defined as day 0. What? Okay, one more time.
Sorry, but those are called follicles. The follicle releases the egg at the time of ovulation.
That's very true. That's very true. Thanks for the correction. Yeah, so you have the follicle in different stages that grows and releases the egg. And thanks for the correction. That's very nice heckler. I appreciate that. It's really helpful actually. So basically the basic thing to look at is we talked about the two-sex hormone, two-cell model. And in the beginning of the cycle we have estradiol, which is one of the estrogens. We basically have estrogen increasing throughout the cycle before it falls off and progesterone takes over. And we can see the changes in the endometrium of the uterus just below that correspond with the different hormones throughout the cycle. So what it basically breaks down to down this dotted line is a proliferative phase and then a secretory phase where the endometrium is preparing for implantation of a fertilized ovum. Once the progesterone falls off, as you can see here at the end of the graph, the endometrium destabilizes. It kind of makes sense. Progesterone, progestation, getting things ready, keeping them stable for the implantation. And I'll get you 1 sec, and then it slops off. Yeah, in the front.
So during that phase, you can only get pregnant during that part, but sperm lasts for ever in your area.
It does. It lasts up to 5 days. That actually kind of brought me to what I wanted to talk about next, which is I thought, we could talk about a couple different forms of contraception. And some people do practice the kind of timing of the period as a form of contraception. So if you look at this progesterone phase, women are actually very unfertile during that progesterone phase. The secretions block the sperm and don't let them fuse with the egg. And some people just try to time that with their calendar in order to, avoid getting pregnant. If you look at this graph, you see rates of effectiveness of different forms of contraception. And I should mention that these are actual use rates, not perfect use rates. So then when they measure contraception, they have perfect use, which is if you used a form of contraception perfectly each time. The example I think I want to go to is the condom. Everyone has heard that the condom is 99% effective. And that's true if you use your condom perfectly and stored in the right conditions. However, when they actually look at how effective condoms are, in the real world, they have an 18% failure rate. Which is, I see some open mouths, which is a really scary statistic. And we don't use these things perfectly, and the more effective forms of contraception towards the top have a closer actual use rate to perfect use rate.
What are the most effective forms of contraception?
Explain which part?
The flail on the bottom right.
The flail? Yeah, it's not a great form of contraception. As you can see, it's kind of in the lower tier. But it's on there. This is straight from the CDC. And there was one over here, our MC of the night. Oh, they're like IUDs, and then there's some more invasive forms of kind of more permanent sterilizations. It's actually a fun fact. IUD is considered medically equivalent to a sterilization, but reversible. So that's kind of interesting. Again, in the front.
The more effective a contraceptive is, the more detrimental it is to the female. Because we're all taking the thing of it, and it's actually less for a man to do it.
Yeah, no, certainly. Women definitely bear kind of the majority of the responsibility and burden when it comes to this stuff. But I guess I'm not sure what you mean by detrimental. There's definitely side effects to any treatment you undergo.
The more effective it is, the more medical stuff that can happen to us. And for men, if you guys explored that, it would be less medically.
No, it's a really interesting point, actually. There's definitely some really kind of invasive procedures on there that have, certain failure and success rates. And there's some new technologies that, like the OBGYNs are more or less happy with. But yeah, it's true that males certainly haven't stepped up and taken the responsibility when it comes to avoiding conception. And actually, the reasons why that is are kind of interesting in and of themselves. Women, when they're surveyed, don't trust men to be responsible. Drug companies have actually been trying to develop this for a really long time. The male system, like I said, is considerably easier to manipulate, but no one would buy the product. It just didn't inspire. Yeah, so It's you know, it's like it's a tricky point. It's a good point to bring up. And I think that's all I got. Any questions from the audience? I'll go there next. What do you got? Bottom right. That's a good question. Is it used on the male or the female? It's well, so I wasn't prepared for that question. I'm gonna go to the back. You know, I don't want to get kicked off for.
This might be a little easier. What's your background in this? Why did you choose this?
Just an enthusiast. What else do I got? What else? So I seeded the audience with a couple questions, so I know we got more questions.
I apologize that your technical difficulties took you over the time, but we're about done. Oh, thank you, though.